Welcome to Allies or Enemies. I'm Jess.
And I am Shawn, and today we are continuing to count down our top 100 favorite board games of all time, and this time we're counting down the 50s. We are going from 60 to 51.
And every video we swap who starts things off, and so this video it is over to you.
My number 60 is Tidal Blades, and Tidal Blades is this really cool mix of American and European gaming styles mushed all together. And so first of all, the package is beautiful. It's just this gorgeous, like oceany world that I just really want to go to. But then also thematically, it's weird, which I really like, because you're like surfers, but you're also training to fight like kaiju who are coming to smash your world. But everyone seems like perfectly kind of chill and happy about it. And how you do this is through this cool dice system. So you're rolling dice to do most things, which usually I'm not super into, but here I like it because you are, first of all, you're leveling up the dice in like really cool ways where you've got this cool leveling system and they're going down these different paths. But then also you got to choose when to spend those dice to fight against these monsters that are coming to smash stuff. And all of it is an interesting decision, really cool worker placement, card management, all sorts of neat stuff, and it's so pretty. And it is my number 60.
My number 60 is Tiletum, and Tiletum is a very Euro game. It takes place in Europe. You're visiting different towns, you're collecting a bunch of resources, you're trading those resources in to build stuff.
Mostly, like all European, have we not built enough cathedrals?
Yeah, you are building a lot of cathedrals, but how it does it is very interesting. You have to do your actions, you select your dice, but the dice is tied to the number of actions you can do in like an inverse manner. So if you want to do a lot of your action, then that means that your dice that you're taking, you won't get a lot of those resources. And so it's an interesting decision of what to do for how many resources you're getting, and everything is interconnected and combos as well. So even though you're just be able to like pick that one action, usually you might be able to like collect other tokens that give you bonus actions, or you'll be putting like people in houses and that will give you actions you can do. And so I love the combos that get created because you can feel like you've really like pulled off a lot on one turn. And so Tiletum is my number 60.
My number 59 is Terraforming Mars. And Terraforming Mars is a game that I forget that I like. And then you really like it,
Yeah.
so you make us play it. I'm like, oh yeah, and it's partly because it is ugly. UGLY. This game ain't got no alibi. It is as ugly as a game comes. It just really is. But we do have the 3D tiles, and that adds a little bit to it for sure. And we've got the Prelude expansion, which I'm gonna say is the only expansion you need for this game. Ignore the rest of the expansions, ignore the other versions. I'm not a big fan of any of the other kinds that I've played, but base game and original Preludes, that's the only two things, and then just stop. Just quit. You got your perfect version of Terraforming Mars right there, plus maybe some 3D terrain. But it is a really solid, like kind of tableau building, kind of card drafty. Well, yeah, you are kind of drafting cards as well, but it's really that building that tableau, and your tableau gets outrageous. It gets out of control. It gets huge, all the different stuff you could do, the combos you can do, which also is why I think this is the best at 2 players, because I don't like to wait a lot of time for my turn to come around. We can play a game of this in an hour and a half with 2 players with the Preludes expansion, which I think is the way to play it, and it is my 59.
My number 59 is My City, and I am just grouping My City and My Island together because I really like them both. I did have to pick one, so I went with the original one. And My City is a polyomino tile placement campaign game. And I love tile placement games, and I love campaign games. And it does it so well. It just builds like bit by bit on how you're actually like playing the tiles down and the city that you're building. And it takes you through, for like My City, it takes you through almost like the journey of the progression of the city a little bit too.
Right, it's got little, I don't think we've ever read the story though.
And I don't want to give any spoilers away, but I think it does the campaign element really nicely. And I like that they group each play is 3 chapters in a setting. And so we always just sit down and play 3 games because it plays so quickly, especially at 2 players. And because of that, I mean, anytime there is going to be another like campaign in the My City style, I'm going to be interested. And it's my number 59.
My number 58 is Explorers of the North Sea, and I have always felt like this is the Shem Phillips game that flies the most under the radar. And it's great, it's terrific. It's the second game I think that they put out after Shipwrights, and I know Shipwrights didn't float everybody's boat, pun intended. But I know that the remake of that one is a little bit better. But Explorers is terrific. You're Vikings, you're just going around, you're exploring different islands. I'm sure doing very nice things there. And you're picking up, you're smashing up villages, you're building things, you're picking up animals, you're moving animals around. But it's got this real Wind Waker feel to me. And I love anything where you're going to different islands because Wind Waker is by far my favorite Zelda game. One of my all-time, if not my favorite video games. And anything that recreates that for me, even a little bit, I just latch onto. And this is one of the better Wind Waker-esque board games that is out there, and it is my 58.
My number 58 is Viscounts of the West Kingdom, another Shem Phillips game, but this time in the West Kingdom series. And you are a Viscount. It's a rondel, so you're just going around this castle doing your actions. But how you do your actions is on your turn, you always play a card, and that determines how far you can go. Then you always have 3 cards available, so you look at all of your icons, and those icons determine like the strength of the action you want to perform. And there are 3 main paths you can do. So you can maybe build a lot of buildings, you can collect inkwells to do manuscripts, or you can do the castle action.
And you're always doing that castle.
I love the castle. It's just really fun. A little bit fiddly, but really fun to do. And so if you're really focusing on one, that means a lot of your cards will have that icon, but it's usually good to do a little bit of all of them too. So it's just, I love trying to like figure out how to get my icons chaining as they slide forward. And I think the expansion helped boost some of the other strategies that weren't quite as strong in the base game. And Viscounts of the West Kingdom is my number 58.
My number 57 is Strike, and this is definitely the lightest part of this. This is as light as a game comes. This is you're rolling dice. You're rolling dice if the dice that you've rolled, like if after rolling dice, you have made 2 dice match, you take them. If you haven't, you can roll again, or you can pass on to the next person. That's it. And then as soon as you've run out of dice, you're out. But if everyone else runs out of dice, you win. And this game is so much fun. It's meant to have kind of a gladiator theme. I guess I could see it, like I've put it on there now. We've got the Harry Potter version, which actually makes them be like little spells. So when you throw and you're only throwing 1 dice at a time too. So when you throw your dice, sometimes you make these spells trigger and it does stuff. And it's actually really cool. I think it's maybe I don't know actually which one I like better. But no matter which one you've got, this is a game that takes like 5 minutes to play each time. You're never gonna play less than 5 games of this in a sitting. And
you have won like a surprising amount of time.
But yeah, I have won like 80% of the games that we've played. So this one wouldn't think is a skill game, but it definitely is, and it is my 57.
My 57 is Marvel Dice Throne. So this is another dice-heavy game. This is like competitive, like punchy Yahtzee. And so I really like the Marvel version especially. And what you're doing is you have your different characters and they have a bit of asymmetry for their powers and what they can do. And you're rolling your dice and then you're seeing based on the result what kind of attack you can do against the other person. And that's it. You're just trying to like beat each other down and be the first one that gets your opponent down to 0. But it's really quick. It's really fun to push your luck because you can roll 3 times. So you might be like, oh, I might be able to get my big attack and then end up with nothing because you risked it too much. And it is my number 57.
My number 56 is The White Castle. And this was like everyone's favorite game last year. Everyone went nuts for this game last year, and I 100% understand why, because it is, you only get 9 dice in this whole game. You are drafting dice from these bridges, and you're playing those dice out onto dice placement spots, and that's letting you do stuff that's generally pretty simple. But you chain that stuff in really cool and clever ways, and you have to, because there's a lot to get done with only those 9 dice. And so you're putting down like a specific kind of dice, and that's letting you do 2 actions, and then maybe one of those actions is letting you do this other thing. And you got to balance the resources you have, and then also the placement spaces on your board, and you also have this little card tableau that you're setting off to do different stuff. And it's so clever how each dice placement that you'd make puts you down these cool little avenues that all feel exciting. Like all 9 turns you have feel like you're doing so many different cool things. It can get frustrating sometimes because it's real tight, but it is really a great game, and it is my 56.
My number 56 is Jaipur, which is a 2-player only game, and it's a really clever set collection game. You have this available like market of cards, and you can either take one of those cards, or you can exchange cards in your hand with the market, or you can collect camels. And what you're doing is you're trying to get the same kind of goods, but there's a benefit to being able to collect a lot of those goods. So if you're able to get like 3, 4, or 5 and play those, you're able to get a bonus token. But on the other side of it, it's also a race to play it first, because the first person to exchange those gets the higher value tokens. And so you're constantly like keeping an eye on what your opponent is collecting to see if like, oh, I don't think they're collecting reds. I'm okay to keep doing it to try and see if I get some more. And anytime you have to exchange cards, you're very aware that you might be putting stuff that your opponent wants in the center. And so it's just this like, it plays very quickly, but it's a really interesting like card playing game. And it's always like best 2 out of 3. And we always seem to go to 3 games. And it's my number 56.
My number 55 is Imperial Settlers Empires of the North. And this is one of my favorite asymmetric games. So you've got all these asymmetric races. I don't remember how many were in the base game because we bought like all of the expansions since. So we've got oodles of them. And they're all these really cool kind of northern based like tribes, and each one has got its own deck of cards, and each one is focused in a really different way. So you've got some that are all about banking, you've got some that are all about expansion, you've got some that are just super mean and like attacking the other person or use the resources in different ways. But it's this game that has really a really simple rule set that you'd think there's not that many triggers that you can kind of play with, like there's not that many sliders, but they've found some really cool ways to mess with those sliders that you don't need to learn a ton to do each one of these different factions, but each one really feels different and looks different. And yeah, it's a game that I can just keep playing because I'm like, oh, I want to try this one. Now I want to try this one. Now I want to try it. Like I always want to play like a full tournament against you instead of just one game of this.
It looks more adorable and lighter than it actually is.
Yeah, it looks so cute. And I think some of the cuter ones are the meanest ones too. And it is my 55.
My number 55 is Viticulture, which is, I think it's a modern classic now. It's a classic worker placement game where you're making wine. And I will say it's my 55 with the Tuscany expansion, because I think that really adds a lot more, being able to take more advantages of cards and open up more spaces.
Especially for 2 players.
Yeah, especially for 2 players. And it has withstood the test of time. I really like that everything makes sense for how you're making your wine. It's just like you need your field for your wine. You need to plant your grapes. You need to harvest your grapes. You need to make wine with those grapes. And still, like, it keeps it really interesting every time how you go about doing that, particularly once you are introducing more of the card plays to be able to do them in like the non-stereotypical spots for those spaces. And I still really enjoy playing it, and it is my number 55.
My number 54 is Ganymede, and sometimes you've got a game that's kind of, it feels like your little hidden gem of a game, and this very much feels like our little secret game that not enough people know about, and we'd love more people to play this game. So in Ganymede, you are trying to move your folks from Earth to Ganymede. So you're moving them from Earth and then to Mars and then to Ganymede, which is definitely in my top 4 Galilean moons. And you are doing this by playing these different cards, by taking different cards. Some of them let you add people to one of the planets. Some of them let you move people from a planet to a planet, but you have to have exactly the people that are on that card. So you kind of have to plan ahead and chain things, and it's got fun little bonuses that you get from how you're playing your cards, and you're building kind of a card tableau, and you've got different things that are going to trigger different things. But it moves super, super fast. I love the theme, and this is one we play this all the time. This is like a midnight, like, I feel like playing a
final
game. Yeah, let's just play a game before we go to sleep. Like, this is totally that game that gets your brain moving, but just enough that it's like comfy. And it is my 54.
My number 54 is Tribes of the Wind. And first of all, Tribes of the Wind looks lovely. The art is by Vincent Dutrait. And in Tribes of the Wind, you always have to have your cards in these card stands to make sure that the back's visible. And that's important because anytime you play a card, what you can do in that card is going to be dependent on what's on the backs of your neighbor's cards. Those represent resources. And so as a result, I always feel like I'm invested in everybody's turn as I see how their cards are like leaving their hands and what is now available. And that might mean I might choose to play a different card because now I can get that strongest action available from it. So what you're doing is it takes place in this post-apocalyptic world, and you live in the trees and you're like flying from trees to trees. And so you're trying to clear up the pollution, you're trying to get your people moving around the board, you're building villages, you're also building these like big tree houses. And it's a race because the game end is triggered when the person's built their last tree house. So you're always trying to maximize what you can do on your turn. And that is so interesting that it's going to be completely dependent on what your neighbors are doing as well. And it's my number 54.
My number 53 is Flamme Rouge. And Flamme Rouge is, I think, still my favorite racing game. We'll see if there's another one on this list, but I'm pretty sure it is my number one. And it is because it's so tight. It feels like cycling, which I'm not really interested in, but this game makes me interested in it, partly because of the gameplay, partly because of the mustaches. And in this, it's a game of inches. So you've got a whole bunch of cards. If you play all your cards like just back to back, you will barely make it across the finish line. It's that tight. So what you need to do is play really cleverly so that you're like not expending too much energy, that you're drafting as much as you can, that you're using the course to go downhill, and to really, it is just such a game of inches, and you're trying to like stay in this little pack. So if you get too far ahead, you're just going to tire yourself out because they've got these tiring cards too. And it's cool that there's this race game where you want to kind of stay together. There can't really be a runaway leader. And it's like the chess of racing games. So clever. And it is my 53.
My number 53 is Terra Mystica, and this is the first time I think it's made my list because we've managed.
Is it?
Yeah, because we've managed to play it a lot more with 3 or 4 players this past year, and really it works better than at those counts than at 2. And in Terra Mystica, you are terraforming land and you're putting buildings on it, but there are a lot of interesting things about that. First of all, is you want to build next to your neighbors because it makes it cheaper. But anytime you do, they are able to get like a power bonus. So by building next to them, you're basically giving them something as well. And you're also going to be competing for spaces too. So that can make it a little bit tricky, but you don't want to be too far or else it's too expensive. The other thing that's interesting is when you're building your buildings, anytime you upgrade, you're having to physically take off the lower level and put the higher level out. And because when you put your buildings out, you are like, that's the resources that you're going to get. That means anytime you're taking those buildings back, you're getting fewer of those resources. So it's a tough decision of when to upgrade because you usually do get bonuses, but you're also losing some of those resources that you need. And there are a ton of asymmetric factions, and they're all fantasy themed, and they all do play quite a bit differently. And it's my number 53.
My number 52 is Suburbia, and this is just a terrific city building game. This is as close as I've gotten to a game that feels like SimCity, which is one of my all-time favorite video games, especially the one that's just like on the green and gray, like gross early Super Nintendo version. So good. But Suburbia kind of recaptures that for me. So in Suburbia, you're playing out tiles to build the city. Every time you play a tile, it does this cool thing where it triggers itself, then it triggers its neighbors, then it triggers anything else in your city, then it triggers stuff in other people's cities. And obviously, as you get more and more of these, you're going to trigger more and more stuff. And it really is timed well for like, there's no more I can hold in my brain. Oh, good, the game is done. Like, it really times that, I think, perfectly. But one interesting thing about Suburbia is I think this is pretty much the only game that we kind of house roll. It's not like our own house roll. It's a BGG pretty common rule for this, but we always play this with 2 rows of buildings. So we always have 1 row of the base game tiles, 1 row of all of the expansion tiles. We always throw all of those in there. It's the only game that we house roll, and I strongly suggest to play with that roll, but that is my 52.
My number 52 is Revive, and Revive takes place in a post-apocalyptic world. The theming doesn't really come across, but mechanically it interconnects just so many different mechanics because you're doing deck building. There's also this shared map board, and so you have to spend resources to be able to flip tiles, to put people on the board, to put different buildings on the board. But what makes it really interesting is you're upgrading all kinds of different parts of your board. So you're able to upgrade your card slots, which is where you have to play your cards, and that's just gonna get you more stuff. And there's this whole like technology track thing that's like on the middle of your player board. And as you are moving along there, you're able to like add these individual tiles, and those give you free actions too. So it can be really satisfying to just be able to do a whole bunch of stuff on a turn. I will say turns can take a while because you actually end up being able to do quite a bit. But between all of that, then there's also like the different ways that you're scoring points too, because you get this like card at the beginning for different scoring conditions, and you're like racing towards collecting these like weird brain.
Yeah, they're really
artifacts.
these cool alien heads.
Yeah, exactly. And so you're collecting those up, but you're also using the board to try and get your people to like the end game goals. And everything feels so disparate, but actually is interconnected really well. It's my number 52.
My 51 is Clank, and I'm lumping all the Clanks in together. But really, I'm happy to play any of the Clank games. And in Clank, you are a thief, and you are going into a dungeon, you're trying to steal some stuff. Generally, there's someone who wants you not to steal their stuff. But there's a few cool things in this. First of all, it's a deck building game, and you're building a deck to do a few different things. And so you've got to kind of build a bit of a balanced deck, or sometimes you just want to be super quick. There's cool different ways to build the deck. But also, it's this really cool push your luck mechanic, because the better stuff is deeper in that dungeon. But the deeper you get, the harder it is to get back out of the dungeon, because everyone's trying to get stuff they're trying to get out. If they get out first though, they are making that bad guy pull more blocks out of their bag. So as you go, you're making noise, which is clank, and you're putting that in this bag. When you pull it out, if it's yours, that's going to be damage that you're taking. And if you get all that damage, you are going to die. If you don't get above a certain point, that means no points.
It's 0 points.
That happens quite a bit in this game, because you definitely, like, you go really deep. The other person sees that, they're like, I'm just getting an okay thing and getting out of here, and then you are in trouble. And there's so much stress in that. The pusher luck's fun, the deck building's fun, the theming of it's really fun. Works great with a whole bunch of players. You can teach new players easy, and it is my 51.
My number 51 is Maracaibo, and Maracaibo is by Alexander Pfister, and he's like the master of the rondel. So very much like some of his other games, you are going around a circle, stopping and doing actions. Also similar to some of his other games, it's multi-use cards. And I think they're used really cleverly, because you have to spend your cards either as resources or you can pay them to be like ongoing assistance. But one of the coolest things about this game is you can really like determine the pace of the game. And that's because like you have a certain distance you can move your ship. So if you're always moving the maximum, it means you won't be able to stop and do as many actions, but you'll be the first to like the end of that round.
And Jess is always doing the maximum. I just want to take my time and visit these islands. And she's like, gotta get to the end.
Yeah, because if I let you do too many stuff, you build too much like of an engine. And if I can push you forward, I'll get a bonus for being first, and you may not make it to the end to get any bonus at all.
I never make it to the end.
And so it's really clever of that balance of how much you want to do, but how quickly your opponents are going that you can do, and keeping an eye on them to try and like maximize all of the different stuff that you're trying to accomplish before the end comes. And it's my number 51.
And that is it. That is counting down the 50s. We have made it halfway through. Next time we are into the top half, and we are counting down from 50 to 41.
Thank you so much for watching. Please let us know in the comments if you played any of the games we talked about. And as usual, please like, subscribe, and hopefully we'll see you next time for another game.